The regular meeting of the Ames Area Metropolitan Planning Organization to order. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll move right into the first item. Kyle or John, you want to take it on over?
So we had 3 items under the consent agenda. The first 2 are kind of annual administrative tasks, so I don't really have anything to add on those. The third one was a ICAP grant application for phase 5 of the City of Ames Traffic ITS network. I have a map pulled up on the projector there if you wanted to take a look at kind of where the network is as a whole right now. Those more bolded lines are the parts of the network that are either currently under construction or under design and are fully funded. Phase 5, which is what this application is for, is those purple lines kind of on the northwest corner of the city. And then phase 6 would be the last remaining phase, which would probably be the next year's ICAP grant application, and that's the red line on the southeast side of the city.
Okay. Any questions? All right. I'd entertain a motion to approve consent.
So move consent.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, thank you. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Item 4, resolution approving preliminary urban plan area boundary.
Yeah, so once again, I have a map pulled up on the projector. So what this is every census, the Census Bureau releases a list of urban areas across the country for all areas with greater than, I believe, 5,000 population. Well, obviously, Ames qualifies for that. And that is that yellow hashed area shown on the map. And then what Federal Highway Administration does is they go through a urban area boundary adjustment process based off that census boundary. And again, we do this every census. So that thinner pink line is what the 2010 Federal Highway urban area boundary looked like for Ames. And then that deeper purple is what is being proposed for 2020's preliminary urban area boundary for this census. And really what this area is supposed to encompass is any areas in and around the urban core that have current urban characteristics or will soon have urban characteristics. And what this is not is it's not the MPO planning boundary, which I have another map here, which shows the current Ames area MPO planning boundary. This would be what all of our planning documents, the scope of all of our planning documents and projects would fall within. So the 2020 update, I'd say, is pretty minor from the 2010 boundaries. We've kind of encompassed a little more area on the southern side of Ames and did some tweaks on the north side as well. But mostly it's similar to 2010. We've kind of encompassed some of the newer developments. And most of this area falls within within our current MPO boundary. So with our next boundary update, which will probably happen early next year, I don't anticipate any major changes to our MPO boundary based off of this proposed urban area boundary. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions on it. What we're looking for is to submit this to Iowa DOT and then ultimately Federal Highway for their approval.
So who actually sets that FHWA boundary? Who made the changes?
So they leave it up to the local agencies in coordination with Iowa DOT to kind of take an initial stab at it, which is what you're seeing up here. And then we submit it to Iowa DOT, who does their review, and then they ultimately submit it to FHWA, who does the final approval of the boundary.
But it has to do with urban density, is that correct?
Yeah, it starts off of urban density, and then we kind of tweak it using our local knowledge of kind of how development is shaping up and how things operate in the area.
So how does that affect people that are in the AMPO but not in the urban area?
So really all the area, so really I'd say that the main impact of not being in the urban area boundary is that for your roadways, they'd be classified as rural instead of urban, which has some impacts on eligibility for certain federal grant programs. But however, if it's a major collector or above, even if it's rural, it's still eligible for many of the same federal grant programs that an urban roadway would be eligible for. So I'd say that's the main difference between being in the urban area boundary versus outside of the urban area boundary.
Okay.
And when would sorry.
Go ahead.
And when would these boundaries be put in place if they do get through all the approvals?
I think Federal Highway anticipates approving this sometime in 2024. They haven't given a specific date, but that's what they've told us.
And do we know what are the chances of approving it or sending it back for like renewal for like review?
I anticipate that they would likely approve it as is or have very minor adjustments. I don't think it's likely that they would send it back. Like I said, Iowa DOT also will review it first. So I'd say if there's any comments, it'd probably come from them. And I assume Federal Highway Division will mostly agree with what Iowa DOT's judgment call is.
Thank you.
So Ames is looking at growing multiplicity of directions. So actually the Supervisor Zinnel's question, if we're to grow in the southeast, for example, to east of the airport and south of the Jewel Streets, would being outside of the purple but inside of the AAMPO boundary have any implications one way or the other in terms of the delegate funding for streets that would be going in that area that may be necessary?
Sure. So anything within the planning boundary, we can review and request changes to the federal functional classification of the roadway, which actually I do have this extra map that I had, which is a little hard to see. This comes from Iowa DOT. It shows the current functional classes of all of the roadways, and that brownish outline is the MPO boundary. So that blue hashed area is the 2010 urban area boundary. And so if there was a roadway that was still within our MPO boundary, but not within the urban area boundary, we could still request a change in the functional classification of the roadway. Let's say there's a road that we know is going to see more traffic with development, and it's currently like a minor collector or a local street. We can request that it be upgraded to a major collector, and it would be eligible for, like I said earlier, the same grant programs that an urban roadway would be.
So I know from the Ames 2040 plan, there were definitely indications of some connections going east-west and interfacing with I-35. That's a long term, not the next 2 or 3 years, but.
Well, and one thing I should add too is the MPO planning boundary, at least according to Iowa DOT, one guideline they give us is the MPO boundary is kind of a 20 to 25 year planning horizon boundary, whereas the urban area boundary is more reflective of kind of the current state or the very near term state of where development is. So that might provide a little more clarification on what these boundaries kind of mean in the context of the high level scope.
So who sets the AAMPO?
That's ultimately up to the policy board here to set. It doesn't run through any approval of Iowa DOT or Federal Highway, although we obviously provide notice to them. And we also need to work with SERPTA, the RPA for Central Iowa, because any area that's not within the Ames area MPO would fall under within their boundary.
And that happens next year, right?
That's when we're currently anticipating is next year, because we would like to update our boundary before the next Metropolitan Transportation Plan update, which we anticipate to begin next fiscal year. So we would like to see the boundary updated before that plan update begins.
Well, from the Ames City Council standpoint, I would just suggest looking at the Ames 2040 plan. I'm thinking on the southeast corner where you jump up and it goes, above that overpass.
Sure.
It does indicate potentially long-term, and if this is going to be set for a 20 to 25 year planning horizon, I submit that it might be good to kind of look at what is included in that plan and making sure there's congruence if there's some flexibility and allowance to go ahead and adjust it. I don't mean like go down to Huxley and go over to Nevada, but I'm just thinking that maybe there's some additional tweaks that might be beneficial so that it's in place if all of a sudden a certain area takes off and we don't have it set, unless you think it's easy to change the boundary. But
yeah, I'd say those are discussions that would definitely be relevant when we update the MPO boundary, the planning area boundary next year. And we can absolutely have those discussions. And I'd say adjusting that boundary is definitely a little less approval and steps than this urban area boundary adjustment would be.
Okay. Well, just thinking to help the AAMPO, if you could do an overlay just showing what the Ames 2040 plan is kind of illustrating potential growth to see how that mates with the planning boundary essentially.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we can do some a little tweaking and have justification for why we'd be doing that too.
Yep.
If I can ask a couple more questions. One is, sorry, I'm just kind of getting lost. How long standing would this updated boundary be? Like, when is the next time that we would have a chance to update this urban?
It's typically updated with every census, so this would be in place around 10 years or so.
Got it. And then kind of building off like the concerns he had, how would it extend a timeline of a project if, let's say, we want to do a project and we need to make an appeal to change like how it's considered for grants?
The process for updating the functional classifications relatively quick. We've actually done it before. Like for example, when we've had the Cherry Avenue Extension Project programmed originally, and actually a more relevant one would be the Grand Avenue Extension Project, which has already happened. For that one, we had to submit because it was a brand new roadway. We had to submit a federal functional classification change that said this new roadway would be a urban collector, or no, it'd be an urban arterial. So it's a pretty quick process, and we actually do it pretty routinely when we program like roadway extension projects and similar types of projects.
Got it.
Okay. Any other questions? Entertain a motion approving resolution for the preliminary urban area boundary.
Motion to approve the preliminary Ames urban area boundary as proposed for submission to the Iowa DOT and FHWA.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Last item is on the Transportation Improvement Program.
Yeah, so this was a amendment proposal for the Transportation Improvement Program. There was no public comments received by staff, so this is the same as it was presented at the previous policy meeting. So I don't have any new information to add on it.
Questions for staff? All right, I declare the public hearing on the amendment to the FFY 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Program to be open. Is there anyone who wants to address the planning organization? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion approving amendment to the FFY 2023-2026 Transportation Improvement Program.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, public policy comments. Jean? Anything for you?
No.
Rowan?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Amber?
Nothing.
All right, with that, entertain motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Glory. That was great. Do I leave this here? Aye.
I'll do that.
I didn't even finish my water.
Oh.
I didn't know I had to add public comments. I was like, oh,
Oh,
no, you don't. Okay. I mean,
Have
I
the
was,
false IDs,
I was like,
passports.
I don't know anything.
All right, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council for Tuesday, September 12th to order. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start out with proclamation for Ames Art Month. Heather, you want to come on up with your guests? Ames Art Month. Whereas the arts, including visual arts, dance, theater, public arts, music, and more, are an essential element of a vibrant and engaged community in Ames, and whereas the arts significantly impact the economic vitality of the state of Iowa by contributing $4.5 billion and 43,000 jobs to the state's economy, and whereas rich experiences with the arts help children develop crucial skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, social skills, fine motor skills, self-expression, imagination, creativity, and communication skills that are integral to success in and out of the classroom. And whereas the arts can promote healing and enhance well-being by bolstering coping, self-esteem, self-expression, and quality of life, and by reducing stress, depression, and situational anxiety. And whereas the arts can help residents feel more satisfied and rooted in their neighborhoods and can foster unity by inspiring community pride, helping people engage in difficult conversations and facilitate understanding different points of view. Therefore, I, John A. Hale, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of September as Ames Art Month. I encourage all citizens to support the arts in Ames. And I'd like to ask Heather, the director of the Octagon Art Center, to offer a few comments.
Thank you so much, Mayor Hala and City Council members. We know that supporting the arts is investing in the community and leads to a greater overall growth. There is a link between the creative industries in the community and community's economic development, job recruitment, and tourism. A place attracts talent, and talent attracts investment. We often hear of the brain drain from the state, but there's also a creative exodus that is happening. I was currently ranked 47th in the nation for legislative funding for the arts, which is 32 cents per capita. Minnesota was number one with $8.23 per capita. Ames is very fortunate to have numerous arts and cultural organizations to provide a wide variety of experiences and promote collective engagement and enrich our quality of life. The arts do help unite people. And I want to thank the following arts organizations and cultural organizations that supported the proclamation for the Ames Art Month. Actors, Ames Community Arts Council, Ames Chamber of Commerce, the Ames History Museum, Ames Public Art Commission, Ames Town and Gown, the Chamber Music Association, Ames Writers Collective, the Bernier Art Museum, Christian Peterson Art Museum, the Creative Artist Studios of Ames, Discover Ames, Farmhouse Museum, Gallery in the Round, the ISU College of Design, KHOI Community Radio, Maximum Ames Music Festival, Octagon Center for the Arts, Ryman Gardens, the Royal Scottish Country Dancers of Central Iowa, Stevens Auditorium, the Tuba Christmas and University Museums, and the Wild Rose. And I just want to say, too, that we have some great events coming up in September from some of these great organizations. Actors opens this week with The Play That Goes Wrong. Through September 24th. Maximum Ames Music Festival takes place September 21st through the 24th. The Ames Artist Studio Tour is Saturday, September 30th is the kickoff. And Ryman Gardens, the art exhibit Glass in Flight is up through October 8th. And then we have the Octagon Art Festival taking place downtown on Sunday, September 24th from 10 to 4. And there's a lot more exhibits and performances this month, so I want to direct you to the Ames Community Arts Council community calendar for any more additional. So we have some great representatives. We have Ed from Ryman Gardens. We have Susie from Creative Artist Studios of Ames, Kyle from Public Arts Commission, and Stan with Actors. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I was just waiting for you to say something. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to consent. Does anybody wish to pull any item from consent this evening?
Do we pull item 12?
Item 12.
And item 11, please.
Okay. Anything else? With that, entertain motion to approve consent list item number 11 and 12.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, item number 11.
So I just had a question about this, that usually when we have permission in an area downtown, then we might ask that there be notification made to other businesses that are downtown if there's a downtown event. In this case, it's going to impact folks on Crystal Street. And so just wondered if those individuals will just be made aware as a courtesy that this is going on, or, yeah. Question.
Don't have the answer to that off the top of my head, but I know that the applicant would have put together an indication of their notification plan as a part of their application. And so we can refer back to that and remind the applicant to contact the affected property owners and tenants.
Okay, that would be great.
Is that part of the normal process and approval? You instruct them to do that?
Yes, we ask them to, because events are all sort of different in nature, and the notifications might differ from event to event based on the nature of the event. We ask the event organizers to describe for us what their notification plan will be, and they can check a couple of boxes for the various ways that they might notify affected individuals. And then at the time that we look at the application and consider whether to recommend it for approval, we see whether we want to recommend that they beef that up and do more enhanced notifications. I don't recall what we thought of it at the time. We must not have thought that it was problematic because I can't recall, but I could double check it and we can make sure to ask them to notify.
I think in the past, they've done a good job of notifying the neighbors,
Okay,
because this is, I mean, I guess it's not the big anniversary event, but they do it.
We've done
Frequently.
this before.
okay. Okay,
They had the event before.
just wanted to check and
Sure.
make sure that neighbors would know in this, so, okay. Then I would move approval of item 11.
Second,
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Before we get to item number 12, should have pulled item number 10. Is there anybody from the Ames High School Homecoming Committee that's here? Well, council did approve all your requests, but I would give you a minute or two if you want to just come up here and tell us what's going on for Ames Homecoming. We'll put you on the spot. How's that sound? Love to hear about it. Always an exciting event downtown. Maybe introduce yourself and tell us what's going on.
I'm Wenju Leo, and I'm a junior, and I'm one of the parade co-chairs this year. I'm Carissa Andorf. I'm also a junior at Ames High, and I'm the other parade co-chair this year. Yeah, so basically the Ames High Homecoming Parade is an annual event, and we have groups from the school, sports, activities, and other clubs, they all participate, and we all gather downtown and we just parade Main Street. And yeah, the band is there too. They play Loyalty, and it's just a lot of fun, and it brings up school spirit, especially to kick off the homecoming week.
All right. Well,
Who do we play in homecoming?
Who?
Yeah.
they're just
No-
in charge
no
of,
pressure.
They're just in charge of parade.
I know.
It's okay if you don't know.
I think it's somewhat. I don't know for sure.
That's okay.
I'm not.
We're gonna win anyway, so.
That's right.
We play the losers.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your work, and like I said, everything was approved as requested, and it is a great time. Boy, a lot of people show up for the parade too. So thank you, and thanks for coming for tonight.
Thanks so
thank
much.
you.
You're welcome. All right, item number 12.
Well, I just pulled this one because I am happy to see we have a new student ex officio proposed here. And I just thought I'd say his name, so
Please
we
do.
don't gloss over it. So it looks like Jeff Clark is up for our approval here as the new Iowa State University student government ex officio rep. So
Yep.
just wanted to make sure we stopped and took a moment to welcome him, as I'm sure this item is about to pass. I'll move approval.
Second.
I did tell him that he had to sit in the audience till we approved him, but don't worry about it. So, anyway. All right. Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Jeff, you're welcome to come up here and join us on the dais. And with that, we would love to hear maybe just a little bit about you. You take a couple minutes, and we'll continue on then.
Yeah. Whoa. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Clark. I'm currently a junior at Iowa State. I'm dual majoring in finance and accounting. I've been pretty passionate about civil service for quite a while now, so it's super exciting to be up here and to be able to be on this board. So thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to having you, and we've always valued the input of the ex officio, so look forward to it. All right, we'll move on to public forum. This is the time we set aside for individuals from the community to address council on items that are not on the agenda. Ask people to limit their time to 3 minutes if they can. I have one card tonight, and after Richard comes, we can podium is open for someone else to come up as well. Richard?
Decorum consideration of the proposal later this evening. It's like I had made a sign over at NAMI this afternoon that I wanted to bring here, but they said they did not like. I mean, I haven't been back to my apartment to get some of my other signs since I got up this morning and went to greet the people at City Hall and in the post office and did everything else. And but they did not like the content of my sign, and they wouldn't let me walk out of there carrying that sign. And a lot of the reason why I made that sign had to do with some of the things the city council did before any of you were on the city council. And that's how long I've been going to city council meetings and whatnot. And you know, I was a volunteer doorman, as you know, for like 10 or 15 years until COVID happened. I've been very hurt in my life. You know, I have, and I've hurt a lot of other people. And I don't mean to hurt anybody. I wish I could do everything in my power to make you happy. I have a button that says that, and I give them to people. And it's like, have the best day ever. And it's like, I love you, and please, good morning, and I love you. Good night, I always care, and I wonder how you're doing. You know, asked people to describe the best day they've ever lived, the worst day they've ever lived, and the difference between the two of them. And I talk about some of those things that have happened in my life. And I listen to other people, and it's like, if you need to talk with somebody, talk with me. But just plain kill me, is what my sign said. And I was so hurt by some of the people that it's like I mean, it's like earlier this year, it's like I was giving a dollar bill that said, "Please let us be naked," to this one woman. Let me be the first to donate to your daughter's college fund. And she said she didn't know how to take care of her daughter when she got to be of age. And I gave that bill, and they complained to the library, who banned me for the rest of the month. It's like my money, I can't give away my money. It's like, and I've seen documentaries of what our soldiers go through in Iraq, where there was this one town that bought a box of thick bundles of $100 bills. They poured it right in front of the American GIs, poured gasoline on it, took a match and burned it. Then took a rake to make sure it would all get burned, and it babbled on, do you love anyone in Iraq? Do you love anyone in America? Do you love yourselves? Do you love your paychecks? Did somebody pay you guys to come to our town to make
Richard, do
yourself
you have
look like a
anything
public
relative to
nuisance?
city business?
We love you, Americans. It's your God we don't give a damn for. Are you guys America's God? You sure act like it. You don't like our national leaders? Pick who our mayor ought to be. Only if
Richard,
they
thank
ask
you.
you
Your time
something,
is
you
up.
answer them. If they tell you to do something, you do it. After all, you pick them. Why shouldn't you be the first people to obey the people you pick? And our
Richard.
national leaders beg your president.
Richard, please stop. Thank you. Does anybody else want to address council under public forum? All right, we will close public forum and we'll move on to the next item, number 25.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're here again to discuss a proposed set of standards for decorum for public meetings. At the last council meeting, the council gave us some specific modifications to the proposed draft, and we've gone back as staff and made those modifications and are now happy to present those for your consideration.
Any questions or any corrections?
I don't have either questions or directions, but I want to thank staff for putting a more positive spin on these and for enabling people to interact with us rather than kind of shutting down some of that interaction. So I think that the direction that it went, where we enable the contributions of the residents, but within guidelines, is a positive step forward with the articulation of the guidelines.
Anything else? All right, open public comment, and Richard's asked to address council on this one too. Richard, do you want to make any?
I'm opposed to it. I'm not going up there
Okay.
to speak. Cut off and public forum, and it's like I'm opposed to this rule. It's like I can't make a sign that would let me. I mean, I made one.
Okay.
Let me take it out of NAMI.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Entertain motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Brian. Move on to item number 26, resolution approving preliminary plat for 4098 East 13th Street. Justin.
All right. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. All right.
So we do have a preliminary plat application for 4098 East 13th Street. Just real quickly, the history, we did have a rezoning associated with this with a master plan. this past spring, and so the proposed preliminary plat is in compliance with the master plan that was adopted with the rezoning. This is the first step of the platting process. Of course, we will come back to you with a final plat once that's ready to come forward. So the two lots that are proposed are what you see there.
Thank you.
And
Picture's not on.
yep, I'll go ahead and pull that up here real quick. Just get my I'll show you. It's just to the east of I-35, and the intention here for the site is. Yep, get that here. Should be coming up. All right.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yep. And there's the two lots you can see there. Lots 1 and 2 on the south side of East 13th. And again, two lots. Lot 1 is the larger lot. The intention there is to develop that with two warehouses, which will be used as distribution centers. And then Lot 2, I think there will be a separate owner. The current owner is subdividing the land. Lot 1 will be sold, and Lot 2 will be retained by the current owner for future development. So if there's any other questions, I can certainly answer those.
Questions? It's our understanding that we're running sewer out there, or are you taking bids for that? Can you kind of comment on the timing on that and how that affects this application?
I think the timing on the approval of the bid or the bids is coming later this month. And at least the timeline right now is that will start in conjunction probably with the final plat. And hopefully I'll be finishing up about the time everything needs to connect. So at this point, the timeline that I've heard is that's all on schedule.
So this building project might be going on concurrent with installing the sewer extension, and then the building owners, it's incumbent upon him to verify flow lines and connection points. Is that my understanding then?
Correct. Yep.
What happens if the sewer bids come in way over budget? What happens to this process?
Well, we'll have to come to you and we either have to see if we can find any additional fundings available, or unfortunately, if we delay the project, it may delay their ability to build. So we're hoping the bids come in right at budget or close enough. We have a contingency, but we'll see. That's why we've timed it this way.
Okay. Very good. All right, open up public comment. Is there anyone who wants to address council on this item tonight? If you would introduce yourself, and you're welcome to make your comments.
I'm Jesse Rognus, 7481 US Highway 69, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm the developer. I just wanted to answer any questions if you had any. My engineer couldn't be here tonight. So as far as your questions on timing and budget, I'm also going to be bidding that project. We do underground utility work. I'm pretty confident at this point the budget's good. So I think that we should be able to keep everything on track.
When would you anticipate breaking ground for the, can you go back one slide, Justin? I think just to show the site plan. It's understanding that you're going to that someone's going to do the two warehouse buildings to start with. Is that correct? Or
yeah, and we just received, I don't even know if you know this yet, the DNR portion approval stating that we're not in wetlands. So we technically could start grading next week on a grading permit once we get it submitted. But we're probably going to wait till closing, make sure that the final plat goes through, and start early October.
Okay. Very good. Any questions? Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Is there any closing questions? Otherwise, entertain a motion on one of the alternatives.
I'd move alternative 1.
Thank you.
Second.
Hearing no further discussion or questions, entertain, go ahead and call, roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
With that approval, so what's the next steps then for the applicant, and when will council see the next thing, Justin?
So at this point, now that this is approved, the next step would be the final plat process. They have submitted those documents and they are under review. So we're finishing up that process this week, and we'll get comments back to them. And once they resolve those, we can bring it forward.
Does it go to anybody else? Is planning and zoning already approved this, or that's already taken care of, or?
Yep.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 27, staff report on campus garage rezoning.
All right. So this next item, I'm going to go ahead and pull a couple things up again. Show everyone a location map of the property in question. So last month you did receive a letter from this property owner at this address. Campus garage is shown there, corner of Lincoln Way and Highland. And the subject of the request was to request a rezone to highway-oriented commercial. Now, the current zoning designation here is high-density residential. It has an underlying land use of urban corridor. And typically, just a straight rezoning request would not come to you with a letter requesting a referral. However, in this particular case, there are some nuances to this and some background that we need to go over, and that's why it's in front of you. The discussion between staff and the property owner started earlier this year as part of an enforcement action. And that involved, you can actually see it there on the north hatched property. There's some rocked area with some vehicles parked there. And so that was the subject of that enforcement action. And in discussions with the property owner, they expressed an interest in wanting to be able to utilize that particular property, but work with the city and see how they could comply with city standards in order to be able to maybe potentially put some paved parking there. So through that discussion, staff talked over some options with the owner, and the owner then decided subsequently to submit the letter requesting the rezoning to HOC. With this being an urban corridor land use, that particular land use does not have a direct implementing zone. So HOC is not an implementing zone of urban corridor. And when we work with our comprehensive plan, one of the first things we look at is what are implementing zones for a given land use. So in this case, since there's no implementing zone listed yet, it creates a question of having to resolve whether the request for HOC is consistent with the urban corridor land use. I think first, and then to that matter, whether HOC is appropriate at all. Now, it is a business that if it were located in HOC, it would be compliant as a use. Currently in high density residential zoning, it is not compliant. So it's a non-conforming use that's allowed to exist as is under the current zoning. It would not be permitted as a new use within the high density residential zone. So with that in mind, and after talking through some of the options with the owner chose to make the request then for HOC. So to kind of bring this to a point of what the real core question is ultimately, would HOC be a compliant zone with commercial or an implementing zone? And, does urban corridor support any specific type of commercial zoning right now, whether that be HOC, as we talk about in the first couple of options. We also give a couple of other options in there, options 3 and 4, one of which, option 4, discusses neighborhood commercial. Now, neighborhood commercial, we do note in the report, would be a compliant zone. It would line up with urban corridor. And they would not need to change the underlying land use of urban corridor in order to rezone to that. So neighborhood commercial is a zone that's designed to be compliant with mixed use, which is what urban corridor envisions here. I did want to pull up one other map for you to look at, just so you have an idea of the land use. Sorry for the scroll there. There it is. There's the properties. And so the orange or pink there color is the urban corridor designation. So it encompasses this property, and then also it goes a bit to the north there along a highland as well.
And while you're there, could you just give us a tour of, because the audience doesn't have the zoning key, could you give us a tour of the zoning classifications around this just to contextualize that?
Sure. So in terms of the land use here, as I said, this shaded, this color here is the urban corridor. It does extend, as you can see there, to the west along Lincoln Way. To the north here is the residential neighborhood, the village residential neighborhood designation. And then you have some darker red to the south here and to the east, which that reflects the higher density commercial underlying land use that our campus town zoning is under. So you do have, and then you have the university property here a little bit further to the east that's in blue. So yeah, that's kind of a description of the neighborhood.
Yep, thanks.
Yep.
Any other comments, Justin?
So just to clarify, the request is to allow the rock parking lot. Continue.
No. So the request is really about the commercial business, which is non-conforming now. Would the city entertain an option where it becomes commercially zoned property so they can pursue expansion of their building, and then they would want to reuse or use that vacant lot to become a paved storage or parking lot area? And that's what those four options are outlining. It's really comes down to, do we want to maintain it as a non-conforming use and look at future commercial zoning that has yet to be written, or do you want to look at it using one of our current commercial zones? Again, is it about redevelopment in the future or the business that's there today?
And could you go back just a little bit you mentioned, and the staff report talks about this, there was an enforcement issue. What were they doing wrong?
You can't, there's two parts to it. It's a residentially zoned lot. You can't have a commercial parking area on a residentially zoned lot. And then secondly, you can't have a gravel parking lot. It has to be paved to be a parking lot.
And do you have any idea of how long, and I don't, how long that area had been used, that gravel area had been used as a parking lot?
I believe it's been for, at least probably a decade.
See, it seems to me
it hasn't been a gravel parking lot for a decade.
Oh, okay.
And the applicant's here,
Yeah, they can speak to it. It has not
curious.
been that. Because remember, it was previously a residential property that was demolished.
Right.
And it's been a vacant lot for most of its life as a vacant lot. It was this spring that we had the complaint about the rock being used as parking for the site.
Okay, thanks.
Can you clarify for me one of the comments on page 5, which refers to staff would expect the owner improve the parking separation and landscape area along Lincoln Way as a result of any improvements? Do we take for granted that with any of these changes, we would also expect the same improvements along Highland? I mean, I know what the situation is now with the parking pretty much abutting the sidewalk on Lincoln Way, but is that landscape expectation then really wrapping around the lots?
Yeah, so I think along the Highland side, we would definitely see what we could get done there as well as far as implementation of landscaping. Certainly to the north, where the empty lot is, where the rock is, where the owner would propose to pave more parking, there would definitely be landscaping that would be required there because it's new development. So everything would be expected to meet current standards. But yeah, in addition to that Lincoln Way discussion, I think there is, a paving that comes right up to the Highland side. So through a master plan process, we'd probably look at see if we could get some landscaping there too.
And the master planning process is associated with option 1 and option 2?
We would ask that if there is a rezoning, the mechanism to implement site improvements would be that contract rezoning approach, which we would use that master plan to deal with site improvements. So for us, basic zoning doesn't directly get to the issue that we brought up. The rezoning can, and the master plan can be that control for the site that asks for improvements as a result of the rezoning. And I can clarify the comment about the vacant lot. So the rock, I believe, was physically placed there this year, which is what caused the complaint. In the past, it had not had rock and been formally used as parking. It had been informally dirt and had vehicles parked on it, which is also illegal. But the placement of the rock caused the complaint because it's a trigger in the zoning ordinance for an actual development standard instead of a parking ticket. So the parking of a car on dirt is a parking ticket. The placement of materials or improvements on a lot is a zoning infraction, and that's why we got involved.
So how long, now you've invited the follow-up then, how long had these people been parking cars on the dirt?
I think you'd have to talk to them when they come up and ask that. I don't think it was a storage area. I think you can look on aerial photos and see at times some cars were there, but I don't know on the regular basis how that was done.
So in hindsight, if these people had just not put the rock down, would we be here tonight?
No, because it would have been, well, they could have come forward and said, I want to rezone to commercial and do a business improvement, but it was the replacement of rock that spurred the whole action to be here tonight.
Well, there's the lesson for anyone. Just don't put down the rock, right?
Seek the permit first.
Yes.
Other questions?
So do I understand correctly that options 3 and 4, the owner had heard about these 2 options before, or this is, as you all thought about it, realized that, oh, there are a couple of other ways to do this without triggering the need for council to do something special in this situation?
So the options 3 and 4 came about later on in the discussions with property owners. So,
Okay.
We had talked first more about the rezoning to commercial. Yep.
Okay.
And then as we looked further, we found that they could do some things as a non-conforming use
Okay.
with some limited types of expansions. And so we presented those to them as well. So they're aware of them and
Okay.
know they have that.
And I know the owner's here, but how did that conversation go? I guess I'm wondering.
They seem to appreciate hearing about it. So,
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Other questions? So I'll call it tan color, that's urban corridor?
Oh,
Pink.
do you mean salmon?
Well, whatever where the,
I don't know
whatever you call that color where the site's at, whatever you call it, I call it tan. Maybe. Is it dress green or blue, I guess, whatever the one is. So what is that urban corridor?
Yes, correct. Yep.
It's looking confusing to me that you have a corridor that's interrupted by different uses. See what I'm saying? You have residential, then you have this other use, and then you have residential, and then you have, can you explain?
Yeah, so
that?
I think so urban corridor was not a fully fleshed out detail of the comp plan. It was really created as a land use designation that signaled that redevelopment was a priority for infill in certain areas. So it was generally placed on areas that were more likely to have a redevelopment opportunity within 20 years versus not. So if you take the example of the apartment building on the northwest corner there, it's relatively new. So we left it as a high density residential designation as that rather than urban corridor. It could have been urban corridor. It didn't change the zoning directly. So when you look at the UC designation along Lincoln Way, it's kind of in patches, and it kind of is more about areas that maybe could have been consolidated into a project.
And if council decides option 1 or 2 with the rezoning, does that necessarily permanently cause an issue with a long-term vision of the urban corridor redevelopment? Or would that prohibit that? I mean, let's just say 10 years from now, owner decides they want to sell, is zoned HOC, but someone else wants it to become compatible with urban corridor. Could that still be accomplished, or what would be the concern of staff?
I think it depends on. So option 1 and option 2 are distinguished by the fact that the land use designation changes in one and not the other. So if you believe HOC is a zoning district that's repeatable for all UC properties up and down Lincoln Way, then you would choose option 1, and UC stays there, but HOC is something you're going to see repeatedly over time.
I see.
If you think HOC is okay for this site, you would get rid of the UC designation under option 2.
In that one location.
And it would become just a commercial site. So a future buyer would then have to look at that and say, would the city support changing the designation to RH or something else to do redevelopment that's not a automotive repair facility?
Thank you. Very helpful. All right, you have a question?
No.
All right, open up public input, and I understand the owner's here, so you're welcome to introduce yourself and you'll make some comments, and then I think if council has a question or two, but we may pose that to you.
Yes,
also.
thank you very much. My name's
Welcome.
Eric Mathery. My wife Shelley and I have owned Campus Garage for about 25 years. We purchased the lot to the north when had the big 4-story house on it that was set for demolition, and we took that down and then, of course, just filled in that lot. There was a driveway on the north side of the lot, gravel parking in the rear, and gravel parking in the front. So the only green space on that lot was just around the perimeter. And then when we had Ames Trenching take the house down, they added sand and rock and things in the center there. So it's always been just it turned into what I referred to as a mess. It was just a big mud lot. The basement had settled. We were using it for overflow parking only during the day, employee cars and things like that when we would be extremely busy. I called in February, talked to Public Works, who then referred me to Planning and Zoning. I talked to, I think, 3 different individuals. Said, hey, could I just put some rock back there to get rid of the mud lot over top of the existing rock that was there? Kind of opened up a can of worms, not knowing the procedure. And it was everyone's at Public Works and at Planning and Zoning. I talked to 3 different individuals. They said, if it's okay with them, it's okay with us. So I had some rock put back there. They said, you can't park on it. Well, I was just parking there during the day with overflow parking. Shouldn't have been doing that. But then in June, I got a call saying, hey, the rock that's on the lot is going to need to be removed. And, I had just talked to them in February. They said it was fine to put that material there, but couldn't park on it. So that's kind of what brought this whole mess in, is that I put the rock down and probably should have gone a little further. When we bought the property and took the house down, initially we wanted to expand the business, build 3 more bays, hire 6 more people. We've got a really good location there. I've got 3,000 active customers. There's I think 12 auto repair facilities west of Duff on Lincoln Way. There is, or east of Duff on Lincoln Way, I'm sorry. There's 2 auto repair facilities east of Dakota right on Lincoln Way. And we're the only repair facility in the campus town area. Service a lot of customers, a lot of students. We got hundreds and hundreds of 5-star reviews. We try and treat everybody like we'd want to be treated. A little bit of history. It was a service station for decades there, going on a century now almost. My wife's father-in-law owned it, sold it to another gentleman. We were able to buy it after he wasn't doing so well, brought it back into the family, and have owned it for 25 years. Originally, we bought it. It was HOC. Probably a year or 2 after that, we were walking through Hy-Vee, saw a new plat map, didn't know anything about the fact that it was going to get rezoned. I had a panic attack and called our lawyer and our accountant and everybody, and they said, "Don't worry about it. It's, you're going to be grandfathered in. You're fine." And we didn't pursue arguing that point. And then, of course, I just got this stuff yesterday, so I didn't have time to go over a lot of the urban corridor. However, this business has been on this corner for literally decades. When we remodeled the business in 2000, mid 2000s, early 2005, 2008, something like that, the original Lincoln Way corridor plan had a gold star on our corner, one of only 5 on the entire Lincoln Way corridor. And it said something along the lines of, this is what you can do with a old Amoco station. We hired Tom Leslie, many of you may know him, hired him to do the architecture on it. We got Polygal from Israel that we had to fly in. We wanted to do something really unique. And I would really like to do something unique with landscaping. I've talked to Deb Hauptman. She said I could hook you up with some great landscape architects. What I would like to do is get all the cars off of the sidewalk, park most of the cars in the back and around the face of the building. I'd really like to have a really nice looking, we spent a lot of money on the building. I could have slapped some paint on it, and, we probably spent 3 times as much money recladding that, making it something unique. And I'd like to do the same thing with the lot as well. And again, all I was basically in the adding the rock back there, we had a big muddy mess. I was trying to utilize that lot just for overflow parking. If we can pave it and meet the city's zoning requirements, I would love to. I would love to get it, in a conforming status again. We own both lots. If we can combine them, great. If we can't, if we don't want to do that, really all I'm trying to do is utilize that empty lot that's been just unusable for 15 years, and use it to just service the existing business that we have there. We've got as many of you know, if you drive by there, absolutely packed every single day. Having a little bit of relief in parking would be a real blessing. So, any questions?
Any questions?
So, Eric, as you look at the options that the staff has given us, what would be your best outcome tonight?
Well, again, I just got these yesterday, so I was running through things. I think probably option 2. Quite frankly, any of the options that would just allow me to use that lot, to allow that lot to service the business is fine with me, really. I would really like the council's and planning and zoning's direction on what we can do there. I'm really open to any suggestions. I was reading through the 2040 plan, which I hadn't done until now. I was reading through I hadn't read through the Lincoln Way corridor plan since we used to have the gold star on our corner, which I was, cheering about, but now it's kind of dropped into it doesn't fit in the neighborhood kind of a thing. And I really think we do fit in the neighborhood. We've been there for decades. I've got thousands of customers who rely on us, and I think we're a good fit for the campus community. I try and be involved. We sponsor the campus race team, and a lot of different organizations and things like that. We try and be involved with that.
So one of the challenges we have is there may be more than one way to accomplish your goal of getting use, but we may be making a change with respect to the zoning that may have consequences beyond today. So I just want you to make sure that as you think about your recommendation to us, that that's also part of your calculus. So we have to think long-term, but so do you.
Yes,
in terms of the use of this.
Well, and again, I would, we've owned it for 25 years. I plan on owning it for quite a few more. There's one of my main mechanics that has shown interest in purchasing that from me. So I foresee it being an auto repair facility for years and years to come. with the council's direction and the city's approval and you know, and all of that. But we, you know, even options 3 and 4 that don't take any approval. I mean, even option 3, I think we'd have to have some green space on the front half of the lot, you know, put a driveway on the north side, you know, park in the back. That would at least take some of the pressure off. You know, option 4, I think would be better suited if the council was not going to take any action, simply because we could pave the entire lot and, you know, and still, even if the council doesn't take any action, if I'm able to get additional parking on the back, I'd really like to brighten up the front. I really want to make it really nice looking. We put a ton of money in the building. I'd like to put some money in the land and really get it nice looking, so that as people are driving through town, bringing their kids to school, they say, wow, that's a neat place, you know.
But option 2 is your recommendation to council.
You know, in going over these, and again, I just got these, I think Justin called me on Friday. I got the email on Monday, and the council meeting's Tuesday. So I've been poring over these last night. I think option 2 would be my preference.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? You mentioned an addition and adding some bays to expand the business. Is that still part of the equation?
You know, I don't think so. I mean, if it was rezoned, you know, the problem is at my age now, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we initially bought the property, we were hard chargers, and, you know, I wanted to expand it and hire a bunch more people and have, you know, dedicated bays for classic cars and things like that. I've had to cut out the classic car market now, you know, most of the old, you know, vintage Jaguars and things like that we used to work on, I had to send elsewhere just because I don't have the space for it anymore. You know, we've outgrown our location, and that's why we bought the back lot, to kind of increase that. And then right after we bought it, took that house down, abated it. The Story County landfill had closed, so we had to haul everything to Boone, pay 3 times the price on demolition costs. We had dealt with, who was it? Council member that used to own the burrito place.
Matthew.
Yes, Matthew. And we just weren't getting anywhere with that. He said, you want a piece of commercial property, go buy a piece of commercial property. And but again, we're originally HOC when we bought the place. It was rezoned to high density residential several years afterwards. So I'm just, you know, we're trying to run a business out of there. And you know,
the reason for the question was, if you were thinking about putting an addition on it, we'd want staff to give advice in terms of, would that be possible to do
of course,
through one of these options?
I really have no desire to expand.
Very good.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you
and coming. Anybody else want to offer input tonight? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment on this item.
I have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
Good for staff. Can Kelly, I guess, could you talk me through the best case scenario for the property owner under option 4?
Yeah, so option 4 is a different version of zoning. It's a really unique option. So under NC, they stay non-conforming. So they couldn't do a building addition, but it enables more of the vacant lot to be improved than if nothing happens from a rezoning perspective. So the way NC zoning would work is you would have less, you would be able to pave more, probably about 3/4 of that lot, maybe a little bit more, just have the landscaping on the front, and that would be able to be accomplished through that process. Versus if you do nothing, the zoning wouldn't let any paving be in front of the building on campus garage, and that would extend as a front yard all the way across. So it's less paving on that vacant lot.
Okay. And would future building improvements be possible through any mechanism under option 4 if it's NC?
So the use would be non-conforming. So you couldn't do anything that would measure the intensity of use, and auto repair is measured by service bays for the most part. If you added retail area or something, that might be possible, but the service bays are the measurement of an auto repair facility.
I see. So there'd be no mechanism, if NC, to expand the number of service bays.
Correct.
Okay.
And functionally, it would be, I'd be interesting to see how you could get more service bays in the current orientation and alignment. You would almost have to look at it going to the north to do that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. That's helpful.
Kelly, do you have a recommendation for us?
I think the question is, if you want it to support being commercial long-term instead of in this non-conforming status, you're trying to balance that long-term goal of future options with what this business owner is trying to do now. We prefer in the HOC options, we prefer 2 over 1, because 1 we think has more far-reaching impacts to other parts of the city. Probably not our goal. Otherwise, I would probably look at, if you want to take no action, 3 gets them a little bit, not very much. 4 is really a one-off that deals with this site and probably has no precedent, no impact on anybody else along Lincoln Way, and it gets them a little more option to the rear of the site. So for me, if you're trying to accommodate the business as much as possible, it's probably 2 or 4. If you're saying, well, work within the rules, go do what you can do, that would be option 3.
So distinguish for us, I apologize, maybe this is clear to everybody else, but could you distinguish between the pros and cons between 2 and 4?
Yeah, so 2 for the owner, they become a conforming use. So the only issue then becomes any improvement that happens on the site has to meet current code. So whether it's a building improvement or a parking lot improvement, the new parts have to meet current code. Option 4, the use stays non-conforming, so they can never make the use bigger, but they can do site improvements. So option 4 gives them full range of use and site improvements. Option 4 gives them some site improvements, but no expansion of use.
So again, I want to think both in terms of the current proposal, but we have to think long-term for this. So 2, if there are improvements, then they have to comply with the code in the future. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, in both versions, any new improvement has to meet current code.
Okay.
You just have fewer expectations, fewer regulations in HOC than you do in NC.
Basically, option 2 would allow them in the future to expand their building as well as the parking.
Correct.
Option 4 would not allow any future expansion of the building.
As auto repair.
As auto repair, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, only the site improvements, the parking lot. So 2 is better for the owner in that in the future, if they wanted to put on more bays, it would be possible. 4 is better for the parking lot. That's okay for the parking lot, but there's no building expansion option.
But if we're interested in giving more options to increase the intensity of the use, then 2 gives, maybe Mr. Mathery doesn't want to expand, but maybe his future owner would want to do that, and it would create more opportunities for intensification of the use of the property.
Yes.
Because that use is here, I think it is appropriate probably to focus on the one business that's there. Normally you wouldn't focus on the one because NC allows for mixed use. It allows for residential. It's actually set up for future redevelopment, whereas HOC has to only be commercial. But we are talking about an existing business here. So HOC allows that existing business to change. NC focuses on other uses that are more in line with what the urban corridor might envision when the auto repair facility is no longer a viable business.
So option 4 really helps accomplish the goals that were set forth in the Ames 2040 plan and allows him to accomplish what he wants to accomplish.
For what we have on the books now, that's probably the best compromise. But HOC is the most commercial friendly choice.
Right. Kelly, actually maybe I should say, Justin, can we go back to the map that has the color blocks? So what I'm wondering is, how much does what we decide to do with this property impact what happens to the property to the north? Because that property to the north is actually residential already. Isn't it high density? I mean, it's a
all the
complex.
all the properties are zoned RH right now.
Okay.
It just happens the land use designation suggests urban corridor, which you would interpret to mean mixed use, really is what that was going for.
So why is that one property to the north, which is a high-density residential property, like what's happening across Highland, a UC designation?
I mean, to be honest, we didn't do a parcel by parcel investigation of every boundary of every designation to see which way you prefer it to be shown as is or how it could be in the future. Right? So I think with RDG in this case, they tried to take a bigger blob of land that could be assembled and probably be a project. So that's how you ended up with 3 parcels here instead of 2. As you go north, there's a little bit newer apartment building up that way. So you can see how they kept RH as that designation there. But that's the best explanation I can give you, is that it was probably in RDG's mind, we need to have a little bit more critical mass of area here to see a larger redevelopment option.
So would it be fair to say that if we decided to go with option 2, to rezone these other 2 parcels, that we're isolating that parcel to the north as UC, and that maybe that also would require us to reconsider zoning on that parcel?
I think under option 2, staff would recommend removing the UC from all 3 properties, and we would notify the owner and they could come say they don't want that to happen. But an isolated UC site, again, we have no zone. So to say what that could really be in the future is really a shot in the dark as an isolated parcel at this point.
And so option 4 does not have that domino effect on the property to the north.
Correct. It stays pink and it just becomes a commercial zone instead of a residential zone.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion on one of the alternatives.
Move out option 2.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, discussion?
This seems like we have both 2 and 4 get the job done for the applicant, but option 2 gives greater future intensification of the property. That's one of our goals, and which isn't possible with option 4. So that's why I think option 2 is the strongest of these approaches.
Yeah.
I would say I'm not necessarily opposed to option 2, but I like 4 better. So I'm still kind of undecided how I'll vote on this. Because I think, Tim, that when you say future intensity, you're speaking specifically about commercial intensity. Option 4 actually does allow for greater future intensity in other ways. So again, we're assuming, and it might be a safe assumption, that this will remain an auto repair business for decades, but it might not. That's a risk that we would be taking here if we go with option 2. And option 2, what that would do is, if it at some point is not an auto repair business, then it's only commercial that can be there, and no mixed use where we see, the retail ground floor, residential up above. And I would argue that while you're right about commercial intensity, the residential intensity is also something we value. So that's kind of why I like that neighborhood commercial zone option better. It also seems to fit really well in where it's at, in terms of, like, it is surrounded by a neighborhood, and it's a little island of commercial there. And that's what that NC zone is more aimed at. So, but I mean, yes, for this particular business use, yeah, you're right that 2 gets them more, gets them the option to expand their business better.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just going to say, does 4 get us the landscaping?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So our recommendation is, if there's a rezone, some element of a master plan that says frontage improvements occur on the existing site are necessary to justify that expansion of the use to some other part of the lot. So what that means, we'll work with them if that's what they apply for, to see what we can practically get. They still have to be able to access the garage doors and all that stuff. But yes, we
And
would get
it
improvements.
sounds like they're interested in doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Kelly, could you help me understand Bronwyn's concern? I mean, in terms of that this locks us into a particular direction. Isn't it the case 10 years, 20 years, a future council has the freedom to go back and change the zoning? So I appreciate the goal of having humility when it comes to making these decisions, but I don't see option 2 as shackling future councils to a particular zoning. Every council is free to change that.
The difference is you're changing the whole policy for this land, not just the zone that implements it. You're taking it from urban corridor and saying it's a general commercial designation. It will be commercial. It's not expected to be anything else into the future. Option 4 keeps it as you see, which gives you more flexibility of whether it's residential or commercial in the future. So there is a policy change in 2 that doesn't occur with 4.
And I certainly agree with that. My question is different.
Okay.
Going with 2 doesn't bind a future council. I mean, I agree with Bronwyn in that if we were doing something tonight that was forever going to be set in stone, we would want to be very cautious about doing that. But 2 doesn't do that. A future council has the freedom to come back and change the zoning on this. Am I correct on that?
It's true with
I mean, if
nearly
none of
every
that's-
decision we
yeah.
make.
True with
I mean,
every
every decision we make.
But
a
that's your
future
point of
council can
concern.
override.
But if that's true, then it really sort of nullifies your concern about the long-term use of this property. If
I would
it
just
doesn't really have any merit, then.
I mean, I would disagree because I think your Plan 2040, while it can be edited at any time by the council, it is your stated policy of the city. Staff marches forward on that policy, not assuming that council is going to ever change those policies or guess when council might change it. So that's how we take your decisions about the land use designations and the policies of the land use plan and all the other elements of Plan 2040 to be our marching orders towards implementation of the goals of the council. So to us, it has heavier weight. To staff, it's heavier weight to change the plan than it is to change an implementing zone. So we would just not presume it changes in the future and move forward as a commercial site. Could be auto repair, could be a strip shopping center, it could be fast food, it could be whatever HOC allows. Versus
Okay.
NC would have a little bit different take on it.
You understand the motion? Roll call.
no.
Aye.
No.
Nay. Nay.
Nay,
Motion failed.
I'd move option 4.
Second.
All right. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
All right, so staff will work with the applicant to have them prepare a rezoning application. That'll go back to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we'll work a master plan component into that. And ultimately, it'll have to come back to you for approval to verify that it does meet the intent of the comp plan and reaches the goals that we've all talked about tonight and the applicant's goals as well.
Kelly, I have one final question. So I'm trying to move more of these kind of requests off of the dais to staff and to empower staff. And probably this discussion tonight really illustrates why it's a good reason why we should try to shift as many things to staff level decisions. Is there something that's unique about this kind of decision that would make it something that has to come back to council? Is it something that we're doing that we could do more to empower staff level decisions over these things?
I think there's 2 parts to that. In this case, you do not have a zoning district for staff to implement.
Okay.
So when the property owner's questions or situation came up, staff couldn't say, here's the solution, we've defined it in advance. So unfortunately, that puts it into your lap for an interpretation because it was not defined in advance. So there was no way staff could have answered the question other than say it's RH, meet RH standards. So that had to come to you. Now, if we had a zoning district and someone wants to change to another zone, that will always have to come to city council. Staff will never have that. But within the zoning district, staff deals with those things all the time.
Okay.
They don't come to you. We don't do very many site plans with city council about how a site is built. That's very rare, actually. Most cities have a lot of council site plan reviews. We do not. In this case, you just didn't have a zone that really could fit the policy. So NC is probably the best choice, but you've never made that statement until tonight.
Oh, great, thanks.
And just thank you for wanting to make this a better place and tearing down an old house and taking care of it and pledging to council that you want to improve landscaping and make it look nice. We do appreciate that. Sometimes we go through all these details and don't express appreciation. We know you're going to spend money on that, but it is kind of a landmark, in campus town. And I know that there wouldn't be a lot of cars there if you weren't good. But there's no commercial for Campus Garage. But the point being is, thank you for what you're trying to accomplish and for.
Discussion, like I say, option 4, I think it's going to be a great option. I think we're going to do some really cool things on the board there. So.
We appreciate that, and I'm sure staff will look forward to talking to you and dealing with you. Thank you.
I look forward to it. It's my neighborhood.
All right, move on to item number 28. Staff report on shared use path at Auburn Trail. I think that the staff report was pretty complete. Is there any questions for staff on this one? Seeing no questions, I'll open up public comment. Does anyone want to address council on this topic tonight? All right. Close public input. Is there a motion? And one of the options.
I'd move option 1.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
And that, do you want to just clarify what that is, just for the audience?
Grant the developer's request to amend the agreement allowing construction of the shared use path to be delayed.
Thank you. All right. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Very good. Moving on to item number 29, staff report on paving requirement for Cedar Lane related to the Ansley development.
All right, so you've had this as a request at your prior meeting. We had it tabled to allow for the property owner to be present to discuss the request. So the exhibit that we have up on the screen is the approved master plan for Ansley, and you can see the red oval on the left side of that diagram, which is along Cedar Lane. And as part of the subdivision approval, we have a standard that expects an interconnected street network with the city system that is paved. So in that oval area, there is a requirement for about 700 feet of frontage to be improved by the developer between their two entrances to the project site. Now, we also have a carryover agreement from a previous development for part of Cedar Lane, where the developer is responsible for half of that oval, and the other property owner, which is ISU at this point in time, is responsible for the other half of that cost at the time that happens. The owner has requested that in consideration of future development, that the city council consider either waiving or adjusting that improvement requirement. So we've laid out 3 options. Option 1 is to waive it in its entirety, which means that the developer would never be responsible for it, and it would default to the 3 properties that have frontage there, or to the city at some point in the future to ever make that improvement of the gravel road that's there. Option 2 is to negotiate an agreement where there's a cost share included. We suggested maybe that if that goes that route, it could be for the full cost, it could be a partial cost, it could be related to plans by the developer and implementation by the city. Now, the difference there is in 2, the city is going to be committed to in the future making that improvement on a schedule that's coordinated with the development. Option 1, there's no obligation of the city to ever do anything. That would be the choice of a future council on how that works. And then option 3 is to defer a decision until there's a future phase to decide if it has merit to waive or adjust that paving requirement.
Questions?
Maybe this is a question for Mr. Bergeson, but am I correct in understanding that the reason for this request is the anticipation that those future phases are going to be expensive and they're going to only increase in cost? And so the request is being made now to create more clarity on what's happening here?
I believe that's the representation in the request, but I'll let them respond to that directly.
Kelly, I'm very cognizant that there are going to be more requests like this. I mean, developers have certain needs for changes as a project develops. And so if we think about how the city has responded to similar requests in the past, can you give us any kind of context just so that we can try to be acting consistently with how we've done in the past?
Yeah, in this particular situation of an unpaved road, I don't believe there is really a precedent. We don't have a series of examples of fringe subdivisions on gravel roads where we participated in those improvements. They're very infrequent to have this kind of partial pavement situation. Where we have participated is when it's oversizing. So when a road is being built larger than the minimum requirement, that's when the city in the past has stepped in. So for example, Cedar Lane is one of those examples. Further to the north, it's 31 feet wide. We had a deal with the developers that we helped pay for that road being 31 feet instead of 26. With this project, we agreed to narrow it to 26 from 31, recognizing it's a lower order street and that having to do oversizing really wasn't necessary. So we don't have a precedent about gravel improvements. We have more of a precedent about cost share, maybe pioneer infrastructure related to expanding a large area for service. But this is kind of a one-off situation related to this project.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? As a point of clarification, your oval.
It got shifted in the graphic. Yeah, the oval should be moved left to actually.
No,
be on
yeah,
Cedar
I
Lane.
assume that. But so is the developer responsible for paving a portion of Cedar Lane going north from the southernmost point of entry and coming down south from the middle entry until you hit the top and bottom of the oval? Does that make sense? Because you say the 700 feet will remain gravel. That's just in front of the residential properties. Or is it 700 feet from the intersection with Cedar Lane and that middle and with the entrance into the southern part? Because the point is, then all of a sudden you have paving, gravel, and paving of Cedar Lane. Does that make sense?
So where you see blue, which is their developable lots, those would
Can
be
you
expected.
Can you enlarge?
Yeah. So where you see blue, you would expect a full street improvement. So there would be so to the north, maybe that's what I'm not understanding. So this section here,
right
between the first two entrances, is already paved.
Right.
So the only section of gravel that, if this request was granted, would be between the second and third entrance of the site. But the access to the site where those blue lots are on the south, that would be improved as a street intersection there because they're building a local street. And they'd have to terminate that into however Public Works wants that to terminate into a gravel street.
I think they're asking the blue lot there.
Yep.
The length of that blue lot, whose responsibility is that?
This would be the developers right here.
Pardon me?
Developer.
So Cedar Lane will be paved on the west side of that blue lot to the north line, to the north property line of the blue lot. Is that correct?
So I would say it would be improved to the configuration that satisfies Public Works as the best way to terminate
Well,
that.
what's the you say 700 feet? Is 700
The 700
feet?
feet is the three intervening properties.
Okay, so the point is, then it would have to be paved. Cedar Lane would have to be paved by a developer wherever the blue lot is shown adjacent to Cedar Lane.
Yes.
I'm just thinking about snow removal for sake of discussion. I'm thinking about traffic going down there. You know, you're going to be going off of a paved, then you're going to go on gravel, and you're going to go back on paving. It's not just gravel until you get into the entrance. I'm not arguing for or against a position. I'm just trying to understand. Initially, I was thinking, oh, it's just the entrance into each of the property, the east and the west line of the overall development. But actually, there's going to be paving going towards the north, then stop gravel in front of the three lots, and then goes back to paving again. That's all.
But it seems like, Mayor, if I'm understanding our options clearly, that all of them are going to result in having that gravel unless the city pays half the
Right.
cost,
No, I-
right? Yeah?
Okay. Yes, I'm not arguing for any position one or the other or any
I
option.
wasn't
Yeah.
thinking that. I just
I was
wanted to
just
clarify.
trying to understand, because I've always been confused for some reason on the staff report for a long time, and it finally dawned on me. I think that's the 700 feet is just in front of the properties.
And it's a round number of 700 feet. I'm not, so yeah.
Okay,
don't
that's
wanna-
all. Good. All right. We'll open up public input, and I know that the property developer is here, and so Steve, if you want to come up and offer any comments, I'm sure that we have a few questions for you to, thank you for coming. And if you'd introduce yourself, and you can start with comments, and then we'll ask questions.
We had this debate whether it was going to be both of us or just me, and I am thinking it's okay. So Stephen M. Bergeson, our address is 3314 Cedar Lane. We're excited to be here. We're so close to being in the final platting stage for phase one. When we entered into the preliminary plat agreement in April of 2022, we had an agreement to pave the section of road that was described that was really not part of the development, but 3 landowners, private, weren't part of the development, but it was part of Cedar Lane. What happened over the last year as we started putting out bids is we were shocked. It was not only a 40% increase in costs for infrastructure, 20% each year, but we had such large expense for managing stormwater that's coming from the land surrounding the Ansley development. So much so that in talking to Greg Bichard today, he said unusual amount because of the Iowa state land that surrounds us. So we got our bids back and we literally were blown away. We came to Kelly and Benjamin and said, we don't know if we can do this. And the encouragement then was to go out and, we started getting bids in Ankeny and Des Moines, and we happened to have 2 contractors that literally had their projects put on hold and had a window where they could come in and give us a bid that worked. But as we put the numbers together to do this type of development, and we've never done this before, but we had our eyes open to how expensive it is to put in an environmentally friendly, conservational friendly development that's paying attention to soil and native grasses. And we started looking at our plan here and said, is there any way we could come to the city? I think with a reasonable request. It's not a demand by any means, because you have every right to say, well, we entered into an agreement a year ago, but is this a reasonable request to partner with the city on a portion of Cedar Lane that doesn't have anything to do with our development in that sense? It has everything to do with our development because it's right in the middle of it. But is that reasonable as a developer to say, could we get help here for this portion? Because we're not asking for help for the portion that's surrounded by our development. And so as we put the numbers together and we looked at stormwater management, we looked at the sewer line coming from Aurora, we looked at the additional pond needs that we're going to put in on the Roth Pond to manage 180 acres of land that's coming onto our property. So literally, we're responsible for how we deal with the stormwater coming onto us. And that's really blown our infrastructure costs up. We have 60-inch stormwater tubes or whatever they're called, 4x4 junction box. All this stuff literally took our expenses way beyond what we were thinking. And so our appeal to the city is to consider a section here that would come to $200,000 of that 700 linear feet. One option one that was on the table is just leave it alone and it become gravel and becomes a responsibility of any future development of those private landowners, which we're in favor of that option as well. But Also on the table is Iowa State's on the hook for 50% of that cost. Because when they were assuming the responsibility to buy the Ringenberg development, part of that was a responsibility for the obligation for their half of Cedar Lane, which is a huge benefit to all of us. And so I would argue that option 2, although we are open to all of them, but option 1, option 2, our preference would be option 2 because of Iowa State's participation. And they have been great, by the way. They have been willing participants to fulfill their obligation to this. So that's really the basis of our appeal, and we'll answer any questions to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Steve. Questions?
You already answered my question.
Thank you.
Do you have any, it's always hard to estimate, but can you pull the image or maybe shrink it a little bit just so, can you just kind of just do a quick review in terms of phase 1 and what your timeline might be for, I know the blue, I'll call it the loop that kind of goes around the 2 north residential properties. That's phase 1. Is that correct?
Correct. And this really came out of input from Kelly and Benjamin, and one of our contractors is, rather than the whole blue area being 30 single residential lots in phase 1, we turned the first portion of the first 15 lots to the north as an outlot and brought phase 1 all the way to the
That's not phase 1, but we.
Go ahead.
Right, you're really starting at that second entrance rather than the
Yes.
north entrance.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to say.
Oh, got it.
And the reason we did was to cut some of the infrastructure costs up
spread it
front and then be able to proceed to the townhouse area more quickly, depending on, how things are selling and such. But we also like the idea of having this Cedar Lane option in the next few years open, because we think that's going to be a real strong market for us. That south end is more the
far.
what we envision is more like the over 55, not that it's, and so that would help us to get down there more quickly without having a large amount of upfront cash flow.
And by doing this plan, it opens up the townhomes and the cottage homes much quicker, and it's going to give us a greater market, we think, to appeal to for the first phase, second phase of the Ansley development. How long is it going to take to get down to the other end? Well, we're hoping that if they build it, they will come. And I don't know what that means in numbers, but we want to get this done as quickly as possible. And part of this appeal to the council is our financial stability for this project is really important. And every developer is going to tell you that, but we want to get our ducks in a row as we go into financing and other parts of this, so that we know where we stand on how we advance in the future.
So I think that when you first showed us this plan, which is really exciting and dynamic development that we're thrilled about, I think the very south end was like the last piece. That's kind of changed now. You're kind of thinking more in terms of going through the middle, and then maybe you can open up the southern end. Is that what you're saying next or sooner?
Well, it was explained to us that the numbering of our phases doesn't necessarily mean the sequence of them. And so we like the idea of having the freedom to, work around the outsides and then go into the middle or respond to the market is basically what we're saying. But I kind of wanted to emphasize something that Steve brought up, that Greg Bishard just helped us understand the magnitude of, but there's 180 acres of farmland that is draining through Ansley. And we're so proud of our engineers, and they've engineered it well. We can have a basement on every lot. But when somebody mentioned that the upfront cost of getting that water through Ansley and out the other side is huge. And then later, we also have a great deal of stormwater costs along the bike trail there. So it's not like we spend it now and then later it's no big deal. It's a big deal throughout the project.
Any other questions? Thank you for coming, and
Well,
appreciate
thank you
your
for all your
your
help and
investment and
encouragement. Thanks.
anybody else? All right, we'll close public comment. Closing questions for staff.
So Kelly, can you clarify what's happening on that set of parcels between the two entrances where the 700 feet are? They're owned by different people.
Yeah, so there's two built houses and one vacant lot in between them. So there's one vacant lot, and they're all three are platted lots. So there's no expectation of future subdivision there necessarily. You possibly could subdivide into one or two more houses, but then in and of themselves, they're not large subdividable properties. So that vacant lot, the construction of a house doesn't trigger street paving. So there's not. So theoretically, yes, they could be responsible for street improvements. In reality, I'm not sure there's any trigger that's obviously going to make those street improvements happen for those three properties themselves.
And we don't have any history of forcing people to improve the street that is a gap in our infrastructure.
I can't say any, but I'm not familiar with it. We typically look at the property frontage as being the responsibility of a development to do it.
Any other questions?
Well, just to clarify, sometimes we have gravel streets, but usually the property owners approach you and they ask for it to be placed in, and then usually special assess it. But that's not what's happening here. There's not a request by the adjacent property owners.
Kelly, can I go back? I appreciate your answer on precedent, but it seems to me like by analogy, there could be other situations where a developer is going to ask us to share the cost of infrastructure. So let me ask that question again without being specific to this kind of specific situation, but just as a general principle, I'm really feeling the way to make sure that what we're doing is consistent with our past and recognizing this is a precedent for future requests. Could you speak just in more general terms about sharing the development costs?
Yeah, I think the question of cost escalation happens on every project. Whether it's a 2-year project or a 10-year build out, you see projects have increased costs. So that's part of the reason the Bergersons came forward. So I don't think that in and of itself is unusual. I don't think the city has stepped in on a residential project and tried to fill a gap on a cost escalation just because things got more expensive. I think the only time the city would typically step in is if it meets our policy for oversizing, or if it's pioneer infrastructure, which is really a new policy of Plan 2040. You don't even have a way of implementing that. That's just a concept that's in Plan 2040. But in the past, it's really just been the oversizing.
So as we want to be able to say yes where we can, recognizing that if someone comes along with a similar request, how do we say no to that request if we say yes to this? And we want to make sure that we have some kind of guiding principles that allow us to be consistent. I think that's a good principle of government. So is there anything else you can give the council that says this is unique and therefore this should be treated perhaps differently than similarly situated requests? I guess that's what I'm trying to tease out.
I don't know that I have anything to give you on that. So as a discussion item, you've never had this conversation before about when you might think it's appropriate to step in and assist a project in some way or not. So our default expectation of the subdivision code, which we would apply uniformly to everybody, would say an interconnected paved street system is our expectation. So I don't really have a policy to give you. I don't think you developed one in the past either to fall back on.
Yeah, so again, I apologize. I'm not trying to look at specifics to the interconnected street. I'm just looking at a more general principle of a developer asking us to share the costs of an infrastructure piece. So,
So
any other thoughts on that?
Well, again, this is unusual. My definition of pioneer infrastructure is where you have something in your land use policy plan that says to be developed, but there's a gap. A gap exists, not within the property itself, but to extend utilities or streets to bring it that infrastructure to the property. This is a little, normally it would be, let's say there was a gap to the south, okay, and we had to bring a street, or I'll give you an example, the 13th Street sewer line ends at Dayton Road, but you have designated land use policy for development on the east of Highway 35. In the past, we'd say the developer has to bring it all the way over there to their property, plus extend it past their property. I'm calling that the pioneer infrastructure, which the city would assume, bringing it all the way over to the east to their property. So this is unusual. Normally, when you see a development, I don't think you would see that gap there because normally the development would be all the way to Cedar Lane, but there happens to be some houses there, so they had to develop around it. So I think this is a little bit of an unusual case. You know, I know you want to be consistent, but almost every situation is uniquely different. You have to see if it makes sense. You could justify this too. Perhaps the Bergesons, I think, have they developed something unusual here with sensitivity to sustainability, smaller lots, you know, as efficient a growth as we can have. They are honoring the land, and Steve can tell you the story of the commitment there. So you're getting something in return, maybe not every development has. But I understand your concern. I'm as concerned as everybody else about everybody else comes forward and says, I want the same deal, but everything's unusual. You have to look at this one and say, can you justify it in this case?
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks to both of you.
I mean, it will happen again, right? This won't be the last time someone says, I have a cost I don't like.
Yeah.
How can you help me?
I'm not talking about the cost. The discussion would be your decision would be based on, do you consider that little piece there pioneer infrastructure? And do you believe you're getting a kind of development you want to support?
So
You're not supporting because the cost is higher.
Steve,
That would be the argument all the time.
would it be fair to say that you just gave us a definition of pioneer infrastructure, but council has not had that discussion, how we define pioneer infrastructure? And perhaps having that discussion before moving forward with option 1 or option 2 would make sense, because we do have the option to not do anything right now and then have a discussion about whether we are defining pioneer infrastructure as you defined it or whether we see it in different terms.
Yeah, you have to ask the Bergesons again, is the delay in making a decision, does that affect anything? It doesn't affect the first phase, I don't think, does it? Maybe it does. I don't know. Is there a time sensitive on the decision, this decision? Because the cost to them won't be until the
Second
phase are out. So you have to.
Or
talk to
later.
them. Pardon me?
Or later. It's not necessarily even the second.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I understand the question, Steve. Is there time sensitive whether you find that out now or you're not going to have to make an expenditure until future time?
No, the phase 1 that we're starting, we're doing. We've burned the ships. It's all ready to go. But the idea of a holistic look of how to bring this together so it makes economic sense, we just trust your wisdom in that. And if you need more time to discuss it in principle, you know, our preference would be to make a decision, 1 or 2, because there's an urgency, but it's not, you know, it's not holding up our phase 1. We're hoping to be done with final planning coming up in 3 or 4 weeks. So we have homes that are going to go in, and so it's not that way, but it is in terms of, I don't even want to say our comfort level. It's just it's just an important decision that I would just ask the council to make as quickly as possible, because there's a lot on the stake, and we're going to be meeting with banks on how this whole thing is fitting together, and that's a piece of it. So anyway, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Is there a motion on one of the 3 options?
I'm going to move option 2.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay.
So we've had a pretty robust discussion tonight about precedent, and but I think the reasons that Steve sort of outlined, that this is a unique subdivision, it's not solely just because the price was higher than anticipated. I don't think that can be the reason for going with option 2. I think there has to be something more. And I think we have to look holistically at this project. And so I think that was very helpful to me in moving me from option 1 to option 2. Option 3, not super excited about that. I think something needs to happen on this. It's just, to me, it's a question of 1 or 2. And I think we, as a council, we can defend and feel good about our contribution on the project with option 2.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
And that was, Nita, were you nay? Okay, motion failed.
I would move option 3.
Second.
My reason for doing that is not to make this an incredibly long, drawn-out process, but for us to have that discussion about what we consider pioneer infrastructure to be, and if it means something different in a situation like this, where we do have those trade-offs of sustainability that may fit with our climate action plan. And so that's why I'm in favor of that.
Yeah, I would kind of echo those comments, and also just the fact that this is several years away from potentially this phase happening. I think we can kind of take our time on making the right decision, since it will set a precedent for other developments and sort of ask in the future.
And I agree too. And I would add that it's not because I don't really like this project, but we will absolutely get more requests for assistance on residential developments. And I think Gloria is absolutely right. We as council need to have those discussions about what we will incentivize and to what level before we just start, before we start doing it. And so again, it's, I do really love the concept of this development. And so I don't want to be discouraging in that way, right? But I do think it's important for us to have those conversations first, basically.
I agree with everything Bronwyn said about the development.
When are we realistically going to have that conversation?
Well, I don't know, we're going to have to meet with you and go over Kelly's program of work and all the things that he's working on. I think it's been a request to do that. So we're going to have to prioritize projects. So I don't think that's, well, it'll be up to you when we go over that.
You have a follow-up comment on that or not?
When are we going over that? Program of work prioritization.
Kelly talked to him today about putting together, we'll have a report to you in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I would think that the absolute earliest would be the end of October. If you think about the last 3 months of meetings, you've come up with a lot of referrals, without a lot of prioritization. So that's what we're really stuck on right now, is where does this volume of work, which is we'll get it to it and do it as you want. You just haven't looked at it holistically in a long time.
Given the fact that we are running out of lots and we need housing, if we could make sure that conversation happens sooner than later, so we have some kind of idea, because I think Ferguson's point, they saw a 40% increase in construction costs, and they had things that they were having to deal with coming across their land that wasn't their cause. And I would encourage you, I mean, obviously you all know where I live. I've seen truck after truck after truck hauling humongous precast concrete culverts to handle the water. And I'm just wondering, are they building underground caverns down there or whatever? But the point is, it is amazing how much it is. And so I agree with you. I think the conversation's been very, very good. And the point is that we can't take responsibility for it. But the point is that costs are getting pretty high and we're running out a lot. So I think it's really, I would agree 100% with advocating for having a discussion soon if we can. Pioneer infrastructure to kind of help engage and understand where we're going in case others come in. So,
and I would point out though that by going with option 3, we are sentencing this project to be higher in expense. So you can kick the can down the road, but you, council, have made this project more expensive by doing that. The sooner we pave this, the better off we're going to be. So it's just more, what we're doing, council, is we're just adding on to the costs of projects So just, I wanted to be clear, that's what we're doing. We're making this paving higher in expense.
I
We
just
are
want to make
also-
sure we're doing it in a fair way when we do
Yes.
offer financial incentives to people, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't think about the ways in which we do that and make a system for them, but I don't, it would be unfair, I think, for us to say yes to this and then have another developer say, hey, wait a minute, that wasn't presented as an option to me. It's an issue of fairness. But I don't disagree that costs are increasing. You're absolutely right about that.
I think we all know the city budget is going to be constrained this year more than ever. So I think it's important to have this sort of discussion in advance of budget time so we can start having a precedent for these decisions.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried 4-2. All right. Anything else on this one, Kylie? Or are we ready?
Do we need a motion at all for the speed with which this comes back again?
Steve and I talked today about just, we asked a question about what we had asked during goal setting, just to get periodic updates, not to review and amend, but just updates on work plans. And so he was going to talk to Kelly and also.
That's why I talked to him. That's why he'll bring it.
Yeah.
He'll bring back a report. He'll take some prioritization on all the things you layered on.
Yeah, so
A
it's kind
companion issue will be this other referral. Remember the Chamber of Commerce on housing. So it has to be referred and report back too. So
that should be
part and parcel will be together.
Not ask him to redo it. It's just where is he at? What's the status of things? So we can look at it.
So what's different is the update is normal, like where you've already prioritized where everything is. That's easy. What I was mentioning was there's been a large number of referrals since June that have yet to be incorporated into anything. So there's going to be two components to that. Here's what you've already said. This is what we have done and will get done. And then this is the stuff you still have to deal with. And we expect to be back relatively quickly this fall with that. So you can look at it. Because there's been a lot of people that want something this fall.
Yeah.
This isn't the only one.
Yeah. Okay. So no
motion.
I don't think it's necessary because it's in the works.
Yeah, I don't
want to get that.
There's no motion necessary about prioritizing because it's coming up here in the next month or so anyways.
I do think that when you look at the work plan at that point, maybe you want to make a motion regarding can we get this moved up so we can have the conversation at that point, then you can sort of take care of it. All right. Moving on, number 30, South Skunk River floodplain.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The southernmost existing wells that the water plant has are located in the Hunziker Youth Sports Complex. And in the early 2000s, we purchased 77 acres here on the east side of I-35, just north of the Skunk River for a future well field. About 6 or 7 years ago, we added a project into the CIP to look at acquiring additional ground somewhere between the sports complex and the ground we already owned for development as a future well field. It's both to spread out where we're actually withdrawing the water from the aquifer, and also a way to help mitigate the cost, because about roughly 3.5 miles of 24-inch water main is a pretty expensive proposition. So if we could get there in a couple of smaller bites, that was going to be preferred. So it's taken a number of years to get something put together, but we're now at the point where we've got a conceptual plan, and that's what we're asking you to do tonight, is just tell us if you're okay with the concept. It's not a binding commitment. There's still a lot of details that need to be worked out. It's just as we work forward on a $2.1 million land acquisition with several other partners, they'd like an indication from you that you at least are okay with the concept of what we're doing. So the first parcel is the Ryerson parcel here in the dark blue. And this is the parcel where the wells would actually be located. They would be along the eastern and northern edges this parcel so that we can try to limit the amount of infringement we have into the rest of that parcel. The state is looking at acquiring the rest of that and setting it aside for conservation purposes, for hunting, for wildlife, habitat restoration. Those types of things that they want to do on that parcel are perfect source water protection neighbors for us to have for a well. So that is the one piece. The second is the C.G. Lee parcel here. And this one we would look at acquiring in partnership primarily with the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, although there would be some other smaller funding partners in there as well. And the primary purpose of this would be to first provide source water protection for the future wells down here, because the groundwater direction is essentially following the flow of the river. So it's kind of doing this as it comes by. Second, we can then have a access route under our control for getting a pipeline from here to here. And then thirdly, by contributing a little bit of the money that you authorized in the wastewater CIP, that non-point source nutrient reduction, we can claim nutrient reduction credits on this parcel. And actually for both parcels, we're able to claim that. The state is not interested in trying to capture that credits. They're getting what they want just by getting it set aside in conservation. So we're going to scoop those credits up as well. And so of the total land acquisition there, we would be contributing about 544,000, I think was the number, out of the $2.185 million. And that would get us what we are looking for that future well field development. Development of that well field could be 20 years or more in the future. But as we see water rights in the state getting a little more contested, we think it's just important for us long-term to lock that source water capacity in the name of the city as quickly as we could. So that's what I have for you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
John, we appreciate the long view of this. As a side note, there have been a number of articles recently. New York Times had one looking at concerns with aquifer health. And I don't want to dwell on this because that's not an agenda item tonight, but if you come across something that could give the council an update, I don't remember in the time of council that we've ever had something that would give us a sense of the health of the aquifer that we rely on. That would be a super helpful data point for council. But I just want to tell you, we appreciate the long view of thinking of these water sources.
Yeah, appreciate that. We can absolutely get that for you.
Yeah, thanks.
John, would the city own this property, or would the state own it, or how would that work out?
So the blue property, the Ryerson, the way that would work is we would carve off roughly the 7 acres that we need for the well, the pipeline, the road. We would own that in our name. The state would own the balance of that parcel. The green property, as the conversations stand right now, that will be titled in the city of Ames' name.
Because just wondering with all that, I'm thinking about Ada Hayden. And just, could this become a building block for something that would be really cool on the south side that could become trails like around, Ada Hayden has trails just go through a lot of, wild area. Obviously there's gonna be hunting. That'd be a different situation altogether in terms of safety, but I was just curious. And I know that the blue is actually county owned. Is that right? Or
yeah, that light blue is owned by Story County. It's the Jordan Family Wildlife Area. And I didn't actually mark it on the map, but the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation owns the whole riparian area right along the river here as well.
I'm just thinking that could become a really dynamic, people are moving out of the state. There's an article in the ISU Daily today, which was very, fascinating. But one of the things people are looking for are amenities.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we do have, we've got lots of water and we have lots of rivers. We got a bike trail that we're going to be working on, north of 30. Just thinking long term, is there some opportunities to be partnering with some of these groups to create some really dynamic outdoor areas that would be going along the river as well as bleeding in, or not bleeding, but coming into that area with a long-term view of that being potentially developed all along there to something that would be a fantastic park, outdoor area, outdoor learning classrooms, et cetera, while still protecting our well fields.
Yeah, I know Story County Conservation certainly has an interest in doing that. I can't speak to what their long-term plans are, but the idea of continuity of the greenbelt along the river is something they very much are supportive of.
And these wellheads, would they be like super high above the ground, or would they be more closer to the ground, actually systems, or is it more like what can be out there at the Hunziker Youth Sports?
Yeah, it'll look similar to what you see at Hunziker. We have to get the wellhead, the motors, and all the electronics up 3 feet above the floodplain in that area. But what we're looking at would be like a 200-foot by 200-foot area that would be fenced off, and that's all that would be carved out of that 119-acre parcel.
If there was a plan, it could be screened aesthetically as well in terms of trying to make it, if it's going to fit in with a. Anyway, okay. All right, open to public comment. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic tonight? See no, close public input. Any closing questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion on resolution approving the conceptual plan subject to negotiation with acceptable terms, conditions to acquire a portion of the Ryerson property for future water well field, and nutrient reduction credit in partnership with the USDA, NRCS, Iowa DNR, and Story County Conservation.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, entertain a motion on resolution approving the conceptual plan subject to negotiation of acceptable terms and conditions to acquire the C.G. Leah property for drinking water source protection and nutrient reduction credit in partnership with the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation and Story County Conservation.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Very good.
Thank you very much. We're hopeful that within 6 months, we'll be back with actual acquisition agreements for you.
Very good. Thank you, John. All right, moving on to item number 31. Is there any questions for staff on this particular item? Hearing none, declare the public hearing on proposal to vacate existing electric utility easement at 2214 Lincoln Way, located on Lot 23, Parker's Addition, Ames, Iowa, to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving vacating electric utility easement.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 And item number 32. Any questions for staff on the 2023 shop rehabilitation project?
Pretty straightforward.
All right, declare the public hearing on the Side Ride 2023 shop rehab project to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. Entertain a motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding the contract to RH Graybaugh Construction, Inc. of Boone, Iowa, for the base bid and alternate number 1 in the amount of $390,165.
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right, very good. Moving on to item number 33. Everyone saw the changes that were made pursuant to conversation and motions precedent to second reading. Any comments or questions on that? Otherwise, I'm going to.
I have a question.
Okay.
We received an email with a comment about the definition of the junk vehicle being requiring the current registration for vehicles, trailers, semi-trailers parked on private property being more stringent than what the Code of Iowa uses for that definition of junk vehicle. So my question is that something we can do? Can we be stricter in our definition of junk vehicles than the state code allows?
We can.
That's my only question.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, entertain a motion on third reading and adoption of ordinance number 4510, property maintenance code.
Move on third.
Second.
Roll call.
If I could, Mayor, one final comment on this. So I was riding my bike to work the other day on Northwestern, and I came across a property that's been a perennial challenge for the city. Today, the weeds are in excess of 3 feet for that property. Every neighbor around that area is being tortured by the disrespect that this person is showing to the entire neighborhood. Property values are affected, quality of life is impacted. And what we're doing with this action tonight is we're empowering other people to completely ignore neighborhood standards and have unlimited height of weeds. So in the past, we would have had our staff be equipped to enforce some limitations on that. So I am really concerned that this is a step backwards in the quality of life. We talk a good talk about neighborhoods, but then we pass something like this that takes away the enforcement ability of our staff. And my second concern is that here we have another meeting tonight. There's no one here from the press. We have received hardly any emails on this, and it's sweeping and affects every single property in Ames. And I respectfully would suggest, residential, fair.
Well, and the rental ones were already.
But we're focusing on the residential properties, and I believe this council respectfully is not in touch with where the community is on this, because people mow the grass and people are frustrated with neighbors that don't mow their grass. And this property on Northwestern, I would encourage you to drive by. That's the ghost of Christmas future. And this was an opportunity for us to do the right thing for our neighborhoods. And not only we dropped the ball, we've doubled down on it. In fact, we almost created an opportunity for turf grass to have an unlimited height. There were 2 votes for that. Unbelievable. So again, Sarah, as much as I appreciate the hard work, this is multi-years that you and your team worked on this. I am so sorry that I cannot be supportive of this, but I don't think the community is supportive of this. Thanks.
So can I just clarify on this vote? I was under the impression that noxious weeds are not allowed at any height on properties. So that to me is not letting weeds grow to any height. It's saying noxious weeds are not allowed on properties, period. And that is what we are voting for, right?
Correct. That doesn't change.
But what if they're not noxious weeds?
Okay.
That's the issue, is that we have different standards for turf grass and for regular weeds. We've been through this before, but that's no place to this. You can't hide behind the fact that it's not noxious weeds. We're asking staff then to go out and be the weed patrol, and it's going to be a mess.
All right. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
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 All right. Move on. Disposition of communications to council. Thank you, Sarah. First one is a email from Mason Adams, Alliant Energy, regarding Prairie View Industrial Complex substation request.
I refer that from staff.
I would move we refer that for a memo from staff.
Second.
Okay. Those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Item 2, got a memo from Brian regarding Arts Capital Grant request from Ames Merit Collective. This needs to be put on an agenda in order for us to take action on it.
Future agenda. For action.
Is there a motion to put it on a future agenda?
I'll move that we place it on a future agenda.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next is talk about anticipating needs or issues. Memo from Chief Huff regarding electric vehicle charging station parking regulations.
We're initiating ourselves. We think we need to have some kind of ordinance. We'll come back with some options before we draft the ordinance itself. How to handle that if you'd like us to put on a future agenda with some options. Not the ordinance itself, with some options. You understand the issue? People can park unlimited amount of time in EV charging stations, even though they're not charging, so that's taking up space for other people.
Oh, we're not talking about the welcome weekend. I see.
That's not yet.
Oh, I
That's
see.
the next one.
That's the next
I'm
one.
Looking them out of order. My bad.
So would this also provide an opportunity to talk about something that came up during our time when our electricity use was going up? Perhaps that not being available at this time for people to charge during those peak hours, or that's a separate piece?
I think it's a separate piece. We're
Okay.
talking about the law enforcement, but that's an important piece. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that's.
That wouldn't go with this. Okay, thank you.
Oh, Brian, you want to say something? We coming back on that other item?
No, I just want to point out, so this relates to the public charging stations and the parking. Public charging stations and that we have currently constitute a very, very small amount of the potential electric demand that we have in the community. So I don't think we're as concerned about those
Okay.
in terms of trying to regulate them and push that public charging off to different times. I think it's more of an issue with regard to the growing number of in-home charging that can be more conveniently accomplished at night.
Okay. Thank you.
But it's a good point. We need a report back with on that. This is separate.
Okay.
This is strictly the parking enforcement in those slots. Those
So do
parking-
you need a motion to place it on a future agenda, or
Yeah.
are you going to do it anyway?
No, I think if you don't want to deal with or spend city staff time on it, you don't think it's an issue, you would not ask to be placed on the agenda.
Okay. Is there any interest in putting it on a future agenda?
This is about parking regulations in EV spots.
That's correct. We are coming forward with it. You may not think that's a problem. You don't want to ever ticket anybody if they stay there all day, then you would not refer it to us. If you think it's potentially a problem, as the police chief does, you'd ask us to put it on a future agenda with some options.
I
or an
would
ordinance.
move that we put it on the future agenda with some options.
Second.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. All right, now we have the Cyclone Welcome Weekend recap. This is just for
Only for information, no
Information.
actions being requested.
next is a request for pedestrian warning light from Jim Lovin and Larry Conley, Scenic Valley Association.
I think you want to refer that to staff. Damian will give you a report on that.
Referral to staff
Second.
For memo.
for memo.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Carried. Okay, item 6, got a letter from Eric E. regarding the Cranford Building renovation historical task credits. I've been informed that they get more points towards application if there's actually a resolution versus just the mayor signing a letter. And so if council is supportive of that, I have to call a special meeting and be telephonic, Zoom, probably 30 seconds long, basically to open it up and see if there'd be a motion on passing a resolution, and it is time sensitive. If there's not interest in having a special meeting, then you can authorize me to send a letter, but we're trying to help them get.
The application's due Friday, correct? Kelly?
I would
So
move
we could have, the
pursue a special meeting.
earliest we do is Thursday sometimes, so we need a time that
Okay,
everybody.
is there a second for the special meeting?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So we're proposing Thursday morning at 11:30. Would that work for everybody's schedule?
I'm not available, but you got quorum.
I'm in a city meeting.
City meeting?
11:30, yeah, for
Okay.
Rummage Rampage.
Okay, so how about 1:45 in the afternoon?
I could do that.
45? All right, so we will call,
The resolution's attached.
what's that?
No.
Oh,
Grace was in.
all right, so I'll call the special meeting for 1:45 PM Thursday. Look for a email from Renee, giving you the links to make it convenient to convene, and you'll have the item, the
Resolution's attached. We'll draw it up and ready to go
yeah,
for you.
and I'll, on the basis,
Grace will send it out.
and then we'll get it taken care of that afternoon. All right, and last is somehow I think I dropped the ball and didn't get this housing report that Dan Culhane sent out to staff to put on the disposition of communications to council. Can we, and since it all was sent out to all of you already, you had a chance to look at it.
You want to
Recommend that we have it referred to the
For a
staff for a memo.
Yep.
I would move we have this referred to staff for a memo.
All right.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, council comments. Well, Jeff, you weathered the first council meeting.
Yeah, that was actually a lot. That was pretty cool.
We're always cool.
Well,
If we do say so ourselves.
Am I expected to come to that like follow-up meeting? The okay. I was just wondering.
You're welcome. I mean, it'll be electronic anyway. If you want
Thursday.
it'll be a Zoom or it'll be a phone call, but you're welcome to, but no, you don't have to.
Got you. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm got nothing going on, so I might
Okay.
take part.
You'll probably be linked in on the email anyway, so.
Heck yeah.
All right.
Sweet.
Rowan.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Nothing today.
Nothing for me.
Nothing tonight,
Okay.
thanks.
So I just want to mark, we live in a community that's very international, and it has been absolutely stunning, the terrible tragedies that have happened. 10,000 missing because of the flooding in Libya and almost 3,000 dead in Morocco. And while I don't know people that were impacted in this community, it'd be surprising if there wasn't someone who was from these countries. And so we focus on city matters for our focus, but these are terrible tragedies, and our hearts and prayers for the families who are affected. That's all.
Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
And please do give us your input on items of interest, especially to students.
100%. Yeah, I intend to.
That's all.
All right. I think we talked about this before, but we have the Koshu City contingent coming on October 16th and 17th. That's a Monday and Tuesday. We're still trying to finalize the schedule tentatively, probably that afternoon. They'll be here and do a tour of City Hall, and then have just a little bit of a, and ask Steve to kind of talk about, how the city operates, the different departments. It's different than what it is in Japan. Expect a 2 or 3 hour presentation, PowerPoint. No, just kidding.
It's a civics class.
Yeah.
It's a 1 hour civics.
Anyway, but I just want you to, if you could just pencil in, if you can make it, great. If you can't, that's understandable too.
Which day?
It's Monday afternoon, the 16th. So again, it's not mandatory, but I just want to give you advance notice that that's coming up.
What time?
2:30.
Well,
is
it's,
what was on the.
yeah,
sentence.
it is still in flux. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces on that. Also, just kind of a heads up is that I'm working on drafting a updated new agreement between Koshu City and City of Ames. So I'll probably be sending that out to you to look at, like to try and get some feedback, and then get that over to them beforehand. And then we would have a signing ceremony Monday night at a banquet. And also we're probably going to have a proclamation as well too. So there's a few things that are coming up, just basically to really celebrate what's going on. And there's a lot of people working hard to make this a really exciting time. And as we mentioned in our celebration or our report, they upped from 4 to over 10 people, coming. So they think it's going to be a great opportunity to strengthen and broaden our sister city partnership with Koshu City. So
I had the chance to meet the Japanese Consul General from Chicago back in the spring, and he was very excited about this partnership.
good. Which is a good. I'm not sure he's been invited. We probably should see if they want to invite us. So
I have his card.
if you could get that to me, that'd be great. All right. We've been informed by our city attorney that closed session is no longer necessary. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.